Thank you so much for having me. I love what little I've seen of your city so far, and actually I didn't see much of the road between San Antonio and Austin. I think I fell asleep a good portion of the ride, and thanks to Clifton for hospitality at his place last night. And I've titled my comments today, Who We Are. And so I guess I should preface this by saying, I'm pretty new at all of this. I'm surprised the kinds of questions that I get from people sometimes. Like I've got some kind of insight into, the future of the movement or something like that. But I have loved being a part of this community wherever I've been able to visit. And really happy to be here in Texas with you, and looking forward to the Atheist Experience tonight as well. I should say on that note too that Matt Dillahunty has been, he doesn't really know, I've talked to him a little bit about it. He probably has no idea how influential he's been, it depends on how much he reads his Twitter feed, I don't know. but he's one of the first people that actually reached out to me in January of last year and said, come to Austin and stay at my place and we'll talk. And that never actually happened for a lot of different reasons, logistics and so forth, but it's really fun to be here in Austin, even though he's not here right now. So I wanted to start in this, I framed this as who we are, but I want to start with who I was. I was, as Steve said, a Seventh-day Adventist pastor for 19 years. I was raised in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I suppose you have Seventh-day Adventist churches here in Austin?
Oh, yeah.
I thought I heard the word Seventh-day Adventist, the words Seventh-day Adventist come up just a second ago. And in San Antonio, there was a couple there in the audience who were former Seventh-day Adventists, so it was fun to meet them. I was raised, my parents were Methodists when I was born, and then before too long became Seventh-day Adventists. And I, at the age of 6 or 7, just did what my parents did, like we all do, and went to church with them. And by and large, had a fantastic experience growing up in the church. It was a really positive experience for me. I would say that the worst part about being a Seventh-day Adventist growing up was high school. Because all the really fun and interesting things happen on Friday night and Saturday, including all of the dances and football games and other sports activities that I couldn't or didn't get involved in. It's a fine line between what I was not allowed to do and what I chose not to do. I really internalized my faith even at that age, and I was living with my grandparents at the time, who were very conservative Seventh-day Adventists and who had a very particular way of practicing their faith that they were very keen on me participating in. And my family had gone through a lot of turmoil up to that point, which is why I was living with my grandparents. So I was just like a rescue puppy, just sort of eager to follow my new adopted family wherever they were going, and to be a good kid and like to get the treat, kind of thing. And so I was a pretty good student and did what I was supposed to do, and I didn't get in a lot of trouble because I had already had enough trouble in my life up to that point that I didn't need to go make more. Although my brother managed to make plenty of trouble, even though he went through the same experiences that I did. So I think the interesting thing is I started college, my subjects in high school that I loved the most were English and math. And it was sort of the beginning of the AP program at my high school in those days, and I took AP English and AP Calculus, which were the only AP offerings that we had. And when I went to college, I decided that I would major in physics and math because I wanted to be an astronaut. Mm-hmm. I know, that's cute, right? I really wanted to be an astronaut. From the time I was about 6, I would write, you can still do this, I think. You can write to NASA, and they will send you all these cool documents, information about the space program, the beautiful 8.5 by 10 glossy photos of, space shuttles and rockets and all sorts of cool things. And I couldn't get enough of that, and I wanted to walk in space. I wanted to be an astronaut, and I knew that just dispositionally, I was not a military guy. I was just not a fighter. So I knew that I would never be a pilot worthy of being an astronaut, so I figured I had to get into space by science. And got to college and took my first chemistry course and really got tired of being in the lab, doing experiments that I already knew what the results of the experiment would be. So I very quickly realized I was too much of a people person and to be a lab rat, so I thought, well, maybe the humanities, because I liked that too in high school. So I switched my major to English, and in my English courses, now you have to remember, I was very fundamentalist Adventist at this point, in an Adventist college in the Napa Valley. Why? The teetotaling, very conservative Adventists put one of their universities in the heart of the best wine created in the country, on par with, French wine. I could say more. But anyway, I don't know. It's like right in St. Helena, where some of the best wineries in the world are. And I decided that as I decided I would take this English major, it hadn't occurred to me at that point that Ellen White, one of the founders of the Seventh-day Adventist movement and our supposed prophet of the Adventist movement, forbade the reading of literature, of fiction. That it was bad for your spirit and for your soul, especially what she called infidel authors, and she named a few, like Voltaire, who my teacher had just assigned me to read for my great books class, Candide. And I went to her and I said, I can't read this. And she said, what do you mean you can't read this? This isn't the syllabus. You're not going to pass the course unless you read it. And I said, yeah, but Ellen White says I shouldn't. And this is an Adventist university, and Ellen White's a big deal, and I can't read this. And I think she immediately knew she had a problem, because I was actually just being a good Adventist. I don't think anybody really knew the other students how important that was to Ellen White. And so she actually, bless her heart, she did an independent study with me in which she tried to get me to liberalize my views about this. And I wrote a paper for her in which I held my line. But I got an A on the paper. And she's still teaching at Pacific Union College, and I've spoken to her many times since then and apologized for being a jackass and a know-it-all. No college professor loves a know-it-all student. God, it's so annoying. Mm-hmm. And I was that guy. So I said, no, I can't be an English major for obvious reasons, so I'll be a historian, and I'll do pre-med because I know I've got to make some money somewhere. And historians, we all know, don't make any money. So I did that for a little while until this kind of nagging thing in my mind to be a pastor just wouldn't let me go. I had given some sermons when I was a teenager in my church, and people had said I was a good speaker, and they said, oh, you should be a pastor. And I saw the way that our pastor was leading the church, and I thought, well, I could do at least that good of a job organizing this thing. And I just liked community building, community mobilization, public speaking, all of that. So it seemed like a natural fit. And when I decided I would change my major yet again to theology, my family really took to that. Even though I come from a family of dentists and doctors, I figured the doctor thing would have really, spoken to them. But when I said I was going to be a pastor, boy, they just thought that was great, that I had finally come to the conclusion that they had come to for me long ago. And to their credit, they hadn't pushed that on me, but they were definitely ready to affirm that in me. And so I did, and I was good at it. I went straight from undergrad to being a pastor in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, which I did for 4.5 years. Then I went to seminary for 2 years in Southwest Michigan. And then from there, I went back to Philadelphia to another church for 5 more years. And everywhere I went, the church grew, about doubled in size. I realize we're in Texas, so I need to put that in perspective. Doubling in size for us meant like from 100 to 200, not from 10,000 to 20,000. But still, not percentage-wise, it's pretty good. And the church grew, and we had fun doing it. And I, little by little, found myself becoming more progressive and liberal in my views. When I, just to, again, put a little perspective on this, when I was a Seventh-day Adventist, fundamentalist. Adventist as a holdover from sort of the 19th century Methodist puritanical era, didn't believe in going to the movies, playing cards, wearing any jewelry or makeup for women, not too much skin showing for women especially. Of course, all the rules first apply to the women, because it's the men who are making the rules, of course, and we all know this. And so I was at that point the church was having a big debate about whether married couples could wear wedding gowns or whether that was jewelry. So that's just to kind of give you the setting, the context. So I was getting ready to go for my undergrad program before my graduate degree to go to this church, and the president of the conference said, we're trying to decide, you definitely have a job, we're trying to decide which church we're going to send you to. And he said, this one church is more out in the country, this other church is more urban, but the problem is the urban church is a little bit more liberal. They wear jewelry and stuff. And I was like, I think that's all right. And I just had this experience in my own life where I thought, we're splitting hairs here. So fortunately, I was assigned to that liberal church that wore jewelry, and not everyone did, but a few did. And so that was the beginning for me. And when people ask, I usually say that my experience with people won out over ideology. So I had come out of school, like a lot of students who come out of college and university, with a lot of knowledge, a lot of head knowledge, a lot of passion for what they know and what they want to do in the world. And then they meet people in the real world and how life actually is. And that has an appropriate effect on a person. And you say, well, okay, this is the ideal that I thought the world was going to be, but here are the actual people and the way they are, and somehow I've got to fit these two things together. And most of us don't do that consciously. We do it largely subconsciously, and over time we see that our views have changed, and we think, wow, how did I get from there to here? And I've done a lot of that, obviously, how did I get from there to here reflection. And for me, it really boiled down to people that I met. Another quick story, I had this guy in my church who every Wednesday he loaded up his riding lawnmower on his trailer and drove it to the church and spent about 3 hours mowing this enormous property. We didn't pay him to do it. He had been doing it long before I was the pastor there. And he was just a sweet guy, and had me to his house a few times, visited with him. And then one day he came to me and said, I have to resign my membership in the church. And I said, well, that's weird. Why? Well, I started smoking again. And that's another taboo. And I said, well, let's just talk about this for a minute. Why do you think you need to resign? Because, well, the last pastor said, I had to resign my membership because I started smoking again. And I said, how many times have you done this? And he said, about 3 times. Joined and dropped and joined and dropped. And I said, well, that sounds stupid to me. I think if you're trying to overcome something in your life, that probably the thing you need is people around you that care about you, and so stop it. But that was me actually making a big move at that time in my life, and I thought back about that later, and I thought, no, I cared about that man, and it seemed ridiculous that he would isolate himself in his community because he had something in his life which I still think is probably bad for him. Well, I know it's bad for him, but it's not like a moral failing or anything like that. So anyway, I just little by little, as you can see, I just made these accommodations in my life for people that I met that I cared about and I thought were more important to me than the rules. I think fundamentally conservatism is about ideology over people, and in a sense I think liberalism is more about people over ideology. And I think one has to give. We have ideologies and we have people, and we have to fit them together in some kind of arithmetic in our lives. And I think, fundamentalists tend to say, well, this is just how it is from the top down, and people have to accommodate themselves to this universal way things are. And then, liberals are more like, well, yeah, this is more or less how things are, but we got to take into account the lived experience of actual people. Some people are, not everybody's in negative circumstances because of something they did. Some things, sometimes bad things just happen to people, and we need to encourage them and support them. So I gradually left behind, almost imperceptibly, my conservatism, my fundamentalism, but I continued being a pastor in the Adventist church. Eventually, I got a call to Hollywood, and by then I would call myself a liberal Christian. I was having a beer on the side, and I had a family by then, I had kids, which changes a person in some pretty profound ways, and And I thought, well, Hollywood's an urban church. I can do a lot of good things there. And we had a great run, about 8 years together there. We did a lot of great community projects. For me, the church had become less about a place to propagate theology and ideology, and more about a place to, as a vehicle to accomplishing some social good in our community. And so we were, like any other liberal congregation, who's sort of marshaling the energies of their people to say, fight Proposition 8, for example, in California, that for a moment succeeded in outlawing same-sex marriage in California, and then, of course, it was overturned by the Supreme Court. So that was, a project that we sort of all put our energy behind, and affordable housing is a constant concern in Los Angeles, and our members organized themselves to advocate for affordable housing and many things like that. But I held on to my faith, and I began to define myself not by what I was so much anymore, but what I wasn't. I still loosely thought of myself as an Adventist Christian, but I was more clear about what I wasn't than what I was. I was not a fundamentalist. I was not a conservative. I was not, a Bible, a literalist, or anything like that. But it was less clear what I was. Today, obviously, I consider myself more of a critical thinker, although I was saying to Clifton in the car, I think, we all have this, we all have blind spots to critical thinking, and it takes constant vigilance to continue to become and continue to grow in our critical thinking. We all love our own pet ideas about things, and it's tough to turn the spotlight inward on your own ideas, your favorite ones especially. I think of myself as a humanist and as an atheist, and as an agnostic, sort of generally about almost all things. I had my first experience describing myself as an atheist in public to the sort of random stranger in the airport. As Steve said, my flight on Friday night was canceled, so it's not a place you ever want to spend the day, especially not Friday night when everybody's having a nice time out in the city with your friends. And so I was sort of trapped in the airport, and when when that happens, you sort of start chatting with people around you, get to know them a little bit, and they asked me what I was doing, where I was going. I said, I'm going to San Antonio. This happened to me when I was a pastor too, right? People would say, what are you doing? I'm going to this conference, and you probably wouldn't be interested. And they said, what do you do? I'm a pastor. Oh. Yeah, so I'm just going to take a nap. So it's usually that, or I just didn't get any rest for 4 hours. People just want to talk and talk and talk about what they believe and what you believe and what their grandma believes and all this stuff. And, so I tried to avoid saying what I did. So I usually am that way when I'm flying. I just kind of want to be left alone. And, so people started asking me what I was doing, where I was going. I was going to speak. Oh, you're a speaker. What do you speak about? And I'm like, well, lots of different things. My experience mostly. What kind of experience? So anyway, I ended up saying, I'm going to this atheist gatherings in Austin and San Antonio, Freethinkers, and oh, wow, that's really interesting. And most people were just, they hadn't even thought that they were gatherings of critical thinkers. They talked about ideas and... so it was sort of my first sort of foray into saying, yeah, I'm an atheist. I used to be a pastor. I had my super shuttle driver later that night was a Senegali Muslim, and the guy that got in after me was a Pakistani Muslim, as best I could tell. He was a Muslim, and I mentioned that I used to be a pastor and now I was an atheist, and it was just silence for a few minutes, and then the driver said, that's a big change. I was like, you're telling me? So we had a nice time. He's a really swell guy. Most people aren't very serious about their faith, no matter what they are, and so I don't think he and I could have had a very long conversation about Christianity or Islam, even so, but it was just kind of these funny experiences that I have. So for me, this whole process was a very slow unraveling. And I asked this question in San Antonio. Let me try it again here. How many of you were believers before you became non-believers? So what's that look like? 3/4, maybe more? So how many of you had the experience where you had some kind of experience where you read something or you heard something in a talk or a podcast or a radio show, and it just switched for you, and you were like, I'm done. That's enough for me. So there's always about that many. It's about 10% or something like that. And the rest of us really envy you because we wish that it was that simple for us. And how many of you were just never believers at all? So probably you are the fortunate ones, right? Because you never had to deal with this. So the rest of us went through a long, slow process of revising what we believe, trying to make things fit, trying to sort of whittle it down. I said to someone the other day, I'm always fishing for a better metaphor, but I remember in my high school class we were talking about gold foil and the thickness of atoms, and the professor put a piece of gold foil in one person's hand, and he tried to touch it, and it just evaporated, right? It just went away. And I sometimes think my faith, though it took a lot longer than that, was sort of like that. You keep sort of working on it, like, a lump of clay, trying to form it into something that makes sense, that makes better sense of my lived experience, the realities that I'm faced with in the world, and sort of doing that while you're busy, like, living and caring about people and all the rest. And one day I looked down and, the thing had gotten quite small, in my hands. There wasn't much left, and that's I think initially that's a painful realization, that God has receded into the horizon so far that there's almost just an echo there of what God used to be in my life. God used to be central, like really central. Everything I thought about was in reference to God and my faith. And little by little, God sort of scoots over to make room for other things like science and other people's experiences, like other Christian denominations. And so you have to sort of say, well, okay, Seventh-day Adventists don't have the only truth, probably. So you got to make room for Baptists and Methodists and Lutherans and Episcopalians and Catholics, and they've got a lot of good stuff, you realize eventually. Okay, well, that's good. So we're not as special as we thought, but you kind of have to still figure out a way that you're actually special. Otherwise, why be the thing, right? So you have to justify that somehow. But there's a way to do that if you try hard enough. And so you adjust things and make room for more people. And then, well, what about people that the Bible specifically says are bad? Like unbelievers. Like all of you, most of you, bad people. Or gay and lesbian people. What about them? And that became, for me, one of the big challenges. I remember the first gay person that I met was the son of one of my leaders in my church back in Pennsylvania. And I don't remember having many well-formed thoughts about gay people at that point. I didn't know anyone. I knew there were gay people, and I had a general sense of what my religious tradition said about that, but I didn't really have a horse in the race. I didn't know anyone. Nothing was on the line. And when I met this young man, it was clear that he was having a hard time in his life for a lot of different reasons, but I wanted him to come play piano in the church because he was a fantastic pianist, and he wouldn't. He finally told me he wouldn't because the last church kicked him out because he was gay and wouldn't let him play the piano anymore, and that was it for him. And I thought, well, fair enough, but wouldn't you just come and play the piano? So eventually he did play the piano, and we got to know each other, and he used to flirt with me in the foyer of the church. That's probably not appropriate. I'm married, first of all, and I'm not gay. But anyway, he was mostly just being funny, and he was a good guy. And he taught me a lot about his experience and what it was like to have the experience like he had. And so for years, I made space in my theology for gay and lesbian people. I did it quietly at first because I would lose my job. But eventually in my church in Hollywood, there were, I would say, 10 to 20% of our members were gay or lesbian. And then right before I was resigned my position, we welcomed a transgender woman to our church. She was 70 by this time and had been isolated from the church all that time. And finally came back because we welcomed her. And she's still there and thinks I'm crazy for what I'm doing now. And I participated in our Adventist Gay and Lesbian Alliance, if you will. It's called Kinship, and it's a group of Seventh-day Adventists, gay, lesbian, transgender individuals who are sticking it out, trying to change the church, and helped start a organization, an evangelical film festival, trying to help evangelical Christians grapple with this issue via film and storytelling. And one day I was sitting down with the two ladies who founded that organization, and I remember this was another thing that clicked for me. I said, I don't feel like trying to force fit this anymore. I think it's easier to simply say, the Bible's not down with gay people. Right? That seems like the obvious thing that I've been avoiding all of this time. Now, what Paul, for example, would say if he were here today, that's an interesting question to speculate about. I assume he would have matured like all of us do, and grown in his ideas and experiences as he did in the narrative about his life. So if he could go from hating people that weren't Jews to accepting them, then perhaps he could have evolved in his other views as well if he had lived to be 1,000 years old. But what we have in the Bible is the record of what people thought at that time, right? And so I just came to the point where I was like, okay, I think Paul was probably wrong about this. Am I okay with that? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I think that was probably just not the issue for him. And so I had that view for a while, though I couldn't talk about that, because to say that one of the Bible writers was wrong about something would have been anathema. But eventually that's what it came to with my conference president. I had this frustrating meeting with them. They called me in every 6 months to vouch for my bona fides, and I finally said to him, can we just do one last one of these? Can we just why don't you get it all out, and then we can decide if we ever need to have another one of these meetings. So he asked me about evolution and creation. He asked me about gays, lesbians, transgenders, bisexual people in the church, and how I felt about their role involved in leadership in the church. And he asked me about my personal life around drinking, which is still taboo in the church, and all kinds of various things about theology, whether I thought the Adventist church was the remnant church, which means the special ones. And I said, no. Everyone's special, so in that sense, yeah, your mom thinks you're special. I think, everyone has their special role to play in the world, but we're not, special in an ontological sense, I don't think. So all of that was more than enough for both of us to agree that I wasn't an Adventist pastor anymore. And, so then, a lot of people say, well, then why don't you just, go find the local Episcopalian seminary and get retooled? And I did think about that. A lot of my good friends are Episcopalian, and I thought so I went church hopping with some people, and my Episcopalian priest friend, who's not a parish priest, she's a school teacher, wanted to go to this evangelical church downtown, and I was like, I don't think you want to do that. Just because it would, not that it would be dangerous or offensive or anything, but just that it would be a long 2 hours that neither of us are going to enjoy. And it was long, and we didn't enjoy it. And it was amazing to me how suddenly, the songs, some of which we used to do in my church, were sort of I just couldn't do it anymore, this happy kind of evangelical thing. So the sermon was really bad. In fairness, he was an amateur. It was okay. He was trying. So I didn't do that anymore. So then I went to the Episcopal church, and I love that church. They do a lot of good work in the community, but the church, it's so Anglican liturgy, and I love liturgy too. I was like, why am I having such a hard time with this? And it just seems so divorced from my real life, and it was so white. It was all these waspy, proud of their rightness, really proud that they have all the right answers about everything. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I can do this, even though I'm that guy too. I don't know if I want to surround myself with all of these people. But so then my friends in the Catholic Church, they had a really cool thing going, because they're 80% Latino, working class people that are fighting for a better living wage in the city. I can sink my teeth into that. And the social justice tradition of the Catholic Church really resonates with me, and So I thought, well, maybe I'll really freak everyone out and become a Catholic. That would have probably been more offensive to my Adventist friends than if I'd been becoming an atheist, honestly. That gives you any idea of how Adventists are about others. So I went to the Catholic Church a few times, and I have to say, apologies, I just was so Catholic. I was just so, the rituals were very foreign to me, and I think just the infrastructure. I couldn't leave one church that was hurting women and gay people and join another one that was doing the same thing. So I was like, I can't do that. So I was really lost. So I well, maybe I'll just do what a lot of my spiritual but not religious friends do. I'll go hiking on Sunday morning or go to the beach and find God out there, which was great. And as far as I can tell, that's about the closest you're going to come to finding God anywhere. And I do love people, and I love gatherings like this, but that was fantastic. And at the end of all of that, I was unemployed, I had gone through my severance pay, I had no money, I was eking it out as a university professor, adjunct in a few different places, and came to the end of that, and it was a rare rainy day in Pasadena, and I was having lunch with a friend, and I had picked up this book by Ronald Dworkin called Religion Without God, and it was really inspiring to me at that moment, and what it did was it opened the door for me. I thought, oh, there's another way to be this person who cares about the world, that cares about people and justice and goodness and the future of our planet and all the rest, and not have to be saddled with all of these traditions, which on the one hand can be beautiful and on the other hand really oppressive. So I just was sort of in that place, and my friend said, what are you doing reading the book? And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll be an atheist for a year. Because it was like December 28th or something like that. I said, maybe I'll just spend next year as an atheist and just see how that feels. And that's as much research that I did into what I was going to do. I had read Hitchens' book when it first came out, and I had read I didn't read Dawkins' book, because it came out right at the same time, I think, right as Hitchens' book, God is Not Great, God is Not Great, and I had read Sam Harris's book, Letter to a Christian Nation, and that was it. That was my extent of my exposure, and I was reading them as a pastor, and the really disturbing thing is I agree with a lot of what Hitchens was saying, and of course, like most progressive Christians, I said, well, he's just not dialed into this whole other branch of Christianity that's not like what he's describing. But as far as it went, I really just agreed with what he had to say. I mean, how could you disagree, really? I mean, it's very... the part that he covers, I think, is very, very compelling. So I guess all of this is to say I just followed that trail all the way until it came to the end. And for me, the end was, I think, the one thing I haven't really taken seriously or considered seriously is the possibility that the reason that all of this is so challenging is that God doesn't exist. And that maybe this is all the effort to make the pieces fit. Really the answer isn't that I can't make them fit, it's that they don't fit. Right? That they don't, these are two pieces from two different puzzles. And they don't belong in the same puzzle, and they don't fit together. And so that's when I started Year Without God, and I just put up a blog, and then now I'm here for some reason. So it was an amazing year. I did a lot of reading and studying, talking to people. I went to the American Atheist Convention. I went to ReasonCon in North Carolina. I went to a couple of I went to TAM, which was amazing. I met a ton of cool people there, and I think the biggest thing that I encountered that was such a relief to me, when you're a Christian and when you're inside of a particular kind of Christianity and a particular kind of framework, it really feels like, it's so hard for me to think of this now, I was as liberal as you get. I had Muslim and Buddhist friends, I had Hindu friends, and I knew the Sikh that ran the Sikh Gurdwara in town. I had a good friend who ran the Baha'i Center in LA that represents all the Baha'is in LA County. I had spoken at the Baha'i Center. So I was not your classical, closeted, little Christian in a bubble. But in spite of all of that, I didn't have a single atheist friend. I didn't know anyone who didn't believe in God, in a robust way. There were people that just didn't care. These sort of atheists, right? Just whatever. They just want to get up late on Sunday morning and go for a run, and then God bless them, or somebody bless them. So they, I just didn't have that viewpoint. And when I stepped outside of that theistic worldview or religious worldview, and I met people who were on the outside of that bubble, I found that they were happy and content, and they loved their life, and were reading interesting things and talking about the same things I love to talk about. And I thought, wow, I guess somehow I just expected it to be this big shift. And it really wasn't that big of a deal. I definitely had moments of loneliness. I definitely felt like the death of a loved one. I felt like a bad breakup, the kind of breakup where you're like, I love you so much, but I cannot do this anymore, right? Like that kind of a breakup, not like I hate your guts and I want to kill you kind of thing. Because I really had a great relationship with God and the church. And I really, aside from being kicked out as a pastor, I really liked my life as a pastor. I miss it in many ways. I liked theology. I brought a book of theology on the trip with me. This new book by John Dominic Crossan called, and I'm not making this up, How to Read the Bible and Still Be a Christian. This is the reaction I get from every atheist, right? They're like, bah! And the Christians are like, no, seriously, guys. So I'm dying to read it because I have friends on the... I love Crossan. I know many people who do. I've read a ton of his stuff. He helped me greatly trying to sort of contextualize Christianity. But the title cracks me up. The fact that, and obviously Crossan didn't, no author, anybody that's written a book knows, no author makes the title, the publisher makes the title. And it's a catchy title. People are going to buy that book on both sides. It's a very smart move. But he's going to, and the subtitle is about violence from Genesis to Revelation, and biblical violence and how to understand it. So, and I already know kind of what he's going to say. He's going to say that the Bible is a chronicle of human beings grappling with violence and coming to sort of how Jesus in the end undermines the violence of empire and sets us on a different track. That Jesus was actually murdered by the empire as a pacifist. And so that's I think that's probably where he's headed with it. That's a way to look at the story of Jesus. I think Jesus, as we have him in the text, is pretty cool guy. And I actually have a much harder time, and still do struggle more with my Christian identity than I did with being a theist. Theism is much easier to let go because God, God just never shows up. God never says anything. God never really responds to anything. At least with Jesus, you have some semblance of a person, whether, we can obviously, I see your wheels turning already. He wasn't a real person. Some of you will say. We can have that debate another day. But let's just say for the sake of argument that there was this vestige of a historical person. Or even if there wasn't a historical person, we have the record of a historical person, right? We have the record of a person in the Bible, the narrative. Like we have Odysseus, right? Odysseus is a person that we know of from literature and history, and we can talk about his story. And whether or not God exists, and whether or not Jesus ever existed, they exist. And you just have to travel around the country, and you can be sure that God is very much a part of everything that's happening right now, legislatively, and all of that. So that's how I ended up kind of in my year without God. I feel like I am at a place where I really want to not necessarily define myself by what I'm not, but also by what I am. So while I am happy to identify myself as an atheist, atheist says what I'm not more than it says what I am. And I think it's really important to be clear about what we're not, as in a variety of arenas of life. There are plenty of things to be against. There's plenty of things to stand up against, bad things. And theism can be among those bad, pernicious things that hurt people, and it's important if you don't believe in God to just say that you don't. But I think that goes only part way towards what we really need in our society, which is people who are clearer about what they are, not just what they aren't. And so I have been, again, I'm just brand new into all of this. It's so funny, secular humanism, when I was a pastor, when I was a theology student, that was a bad thing. Seriously, that was like the evil movement that we had to resist and fight against. And now I'm like, wow, that's really interesting, because humanist is like a sort of the soft way of saying that you're an atheist many times. And sometimes atheists are like, I'm not a humanist, I'm an atheist. So it's like, wow, humanists are getting it from both sides, But I like this idea of being a humanist. I've not delved into it fully. I sort of measure things by how much I've read sometimes, and I haven't read that much yet. I'm still a baby humanist, if you will. Although I think I was a Christian humanist for a long, long time. I didn't think of myself in those terms. I would never have said humanist. And I'm on track to read all of Ingersoll's stuff and try to catch up on things that I had. Thomas Paine, who was among the infidel authors that Ellen White said we should never read. I picked up Thomas Paine last year, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Why did I not read this sooner? So a lot of that kind of catching up. A friend of mine just texted me yesterday. She's still a Christian, and she said, I went to public university. I always forget that you didn't go to public university. Like, I was exposed to anthropology and sociology and science in a way that in a Christian college I never was. And so I have a lot of catching up to do. So I really feel like, for me, the next journey is about two things. Really, for myself personally, trying to identify how we move forward. I mean, the biggest oh crap moment for a theist who becomes an atheist is, what do I do now? Because your whole worldview, it's hard to, if you weren't there before, hard to really explain to folks that never had that. Your whole worldview and your whole sense of your identity and your place in the world and your purpose and how the arc of the universe is bending towards this glorious conclusion, which is beautiful in many ways. If that's gone, what am I doing now? What am I supposed to do with my life? What am I supposed to give myself to? So I'm that's kind of where I'm moving myself personally. I'm comfortable with the idea that there isn't a God and that we're not going to live forever. I even started feeling that was kind of greedy while I was still a pastor. Somebody came to me really concerned about not living forever, and I said, why are you worrying about live forever? Like, don't you think that's asking a lot? Like, that's pretty greedy, don't you think? I mean, the world's small, and we need to make room for more people, right? I mean, like, just be happy with what you've got. Don't be so greedy. So I'm very comfortable with that idea. I mean, nobody wants to die, but, I'm pretty sure I'm not any more special than anybody else. But then I think what's really interesting to me beyond my own personal journey is that I'm aware this year, in this past year, how many people are in this quandary, in this in-between space, neither this nor that, really feeling uncomfortable in the church, uncomfortable identifying as a Christian, but really also uncomfortable coming to the last step and saying, I don't really think there's anything out there beyond chemicals, I think it's just us. And people that's kind of an emotional space to be in too. Like, not everything is sort of raw rationality, right? Like, people have emotions wrapped up in this, family relationships, social relationships, work sometimes, especially in places, not so much like Austin probably, but other parts of Texas and the South where it's really unpopular not to be a Christian. It's a little easy for me in California. And probably a little easier here in Austin, though I just got here yesterday, so I don't know. But I think there's a lot of people who are really stuck in this in-between space. And my experience was that I immediately got attacked. I use that word slightly loosely, like I didn't get physically attacked. But I was definitely internet attacked from both sides, from Christians who thought I was a betrayal, a coward, a sellout, you name it, and from atheists who thought I was just crashing their party or, jumping on some kind of bandwagon where I was going to make a lot of money. If anybody's made a lot of money being an atheist, please let me know. I haven't figured it out yet. But there was just that. And I understand the skepticism now. Like, I look back on it and go, like, okay, I can see how that would seem like, who is this guy and what's he up to? Totally fair. But then even after that, it's been a little rocky, you know, unless you're ready to like submerge a crucifix in a vat of urine. For some people, you're not really an atheist yet, you know, like you really have to be able to like, I don't know, what did someone say the other day, like, do something really offensive. I can't remember what the thing was. Like, if you can't do that, you're really not an atheist. And I was like, all right, well, have fun with that. I don't know what to say. So I think there's a lot of people who are turned off by both kind of extremes and are just really wanting to make sense of their life, and then they don't have a place to be and do that work. Because it is work. For those of you that have been through it, you know how much work it is. And most of you did it alone. Or maybe with one close friend that you could confide in. And most people don't have that. And so they're just like, it's easier just to keep going to church and crossing their fingers while they pray than to really do that work of coming out. Some people are faced with a real emotional and physical crisis, and they do it at great cost. But I'm very interested in creating a space for people, and I don't even know yet what that space looks like, but a place where people can process their doubts, process their questions, just ask the next question in a series of questions. They don't have to come to where I am tomorrow. All they really have to do is think critically about the question they have on their mind right now. And that question might be, man, I really prayed for my mom to get better and she didn't get better. And where is God? You know? And for them to just be encouraged that it's okay to have that question. It's okay to ask that question and to feel that, what that feels like, and allow that question to take you to the next question, and just be a critical thinker. You'll get there. Like, we don't have to rush people, I don't feel, to some kind of conclusion or strip people's faith away from them forcefully. I really think like critical thinking and a community space that's safe for them to do that work is the kind of thing that will help people arrive wherever they need to be. And some people aren't going to become atheists. They're going to be really awesome Episcopalians or Unitarian Universalists or Catholics or whatever they're going to be that are like humanitarians. They're humanists in the framework that they're in. And I'm personally, and I know I clearly don't speak for everyone, but I'm personally fine with that. I'm not on a crusade to eradicate religion. First of all, I just think it's impractical. Just don't see that it's going to happen anytime in my lifetime, so we got to make do with what we have, try to make the world a better place. That's my story, and I would love to interact with you. Can I take a picture of you all? Say hi to my friends on Facebook. Thank you.
What is this, just to prove you have friends?
That's just to prove that look at all these people that came out to listen to my silly story.
I'm not kidding you.
What's been the response from the Adventist press of that?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked. For a long time, it was nothing. It was just, I think during the year, Adventists in particular and Christians in general, there was still a chance that I might come back. And to be honest, I really was hoping there was a God. My disposition, people always want to know, where were you at on day one? Where I was at on day one was, I was very suspicious that there was not a God. I was leaning that way, but I really wanted there to be a God. So my research was really, I didn't read Richard Dawkins. I think it's great what he's doing. Those questions were answered for me a while back. I wanted to dig into what people that had been thinking about this question at a much deeper theological level had to say, and I really wanted there to be a God. So I was not like, oh yeah, I'm really an atheist and I'll just kind of do this for kicks. It was more like I really wanted to find out. And so I think Adventists left me alone during that year because they thought, let's not antagonize them too much. On the other hand, nobody really tried to win me back either. I was a little disappointed. Like, not that I wanted people to kind of berate me about things, but I really was thinking that a sincere friend would say, like, hey, you want to have lunch? Let's talk. Like, I've had those doubts. That's what Christians like to say too. I've had those doubts too, and I've worked through that, and I'd like to share with you, which I was really open to. I mean, it was a research project. I went to atheist gatherings to let them tell me why they weren't Christians. I wanted to talk to Christians about why they were. I wanted to find out what their perspective was, and people didn't really say anything to me. And then at the end of the year, the first week of January, an article came out in the Adventist Review, which is the flagship magazine of the Review of the Adventist Church. This guy who is not a counselor or a medical doctor of any kind, he's not trained to be a therapist, but does that kind of anti-depression, where he kind of works with people who are depressed, apparently. I've never met him, I've never spoken to him, I've never emailed with him, never so much as tweeted him. And he diagnosed me with severe depression, and then he was very concerned about me, felt very sorry for me, and he said it's clear that he's suffering from all the signs of major depression. And my Facebook friend said, "Oh, we saw some pictures of your weekend vacation last weekend. You seem really depressed." And my response was like, I have been very depressed in my life, so screw you. And second of all, I'm not depressed right now, so screw you again. Like, so you have no idea what you're talking about. Then, just last week, another article came out on the Review, which was really weird, and I can't believe who must be the editor over there these days. But he basically said, what's his point? He said that, Christianity requires an illogical leap of faith.
Yeah.
And, did you read that?
No.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. It requires, it's sort of the Kierkegaardian kind of notion that faith really is faith. In other words, he agrees with you and me that this is the illogical leap of faith. It's required, and when you look at Jesus outside the limited scope of pure logic, he said. And I was just like, it's kind of like, I'm not a logician. I didn't go to graduate school for logic, but I'm pretty sure that Jesus and logic are two different conversations completely. So, I don't know. I mean, I kind of get the idea of what he means. And then he talked about experience, personal experience. Those of us that have a personal experience with Jesus every day have a hard time understanding how a person could leave their faith. But again, lots of compassion. Lots of concern. And then, I just stumbled across 75 very unfortunate comments on another interview that I did with a really cool guy, a friend of mine, who interviewed me for the magazine Adventist Today online. And it was a great interview. I loved it, and it was so much fun doing it. And the comments are just, peel the paint off the wall kind of comments. It was just terrible. I was like, I should not have read this. Not that I care that much about it, but it was just, I wanted to reason with them. I don't know how I read these things and I'm like, no, you don't understand. And I'm like, idiot. Don't waste your time. So, it's been unfortunate, yeah.
What about your jewelry wearing life?
Are you asking about jewelry or about my wife?
No, about how did she cope with this?
Oh, yeah, She and I are not together anymore, but not because of that. I mean, it's been it was a long relationship, lots of good things, lots of bad things, but we were sort of on our last leg before this, and a lot of things came falling apart around the same time. And she was tracking with me throughout our journey together. I think she still believes in God, but she's certainly not a fan of organized religion and all that, so... she did say that there's a documentary being made about Year Without God, and she's now putting her foot down if the kids can't be in the documentary. So we're working on that. Because everybody wants to know how the kids respond to it and all. It's a very important part of the story. And I keep telling her, I'm not shoving anything down my kid's throat. I never was a shoving down someone's throat kind of person in the first place. I was never much of a proselytizer. I'm certainly not trying to force anything on my kids. I think Zoe, my oldest, wants to know all these things. She tells me she believes in God, which I say to her, that's great. Keep reading, keep studying, keep an open mind. I love you regardless of what you decide. She said to me one day, I'm confused about all this. And I said, yeah, I'm confused too. So we're in it together. I don't know what else you're supposed to say to a child or an adult for that matter, who's in that position. So Yeah, it's been hard for the family. My youngest is really sad about it, even though she doesn't know why. She said, I want you to be a Christian at the end of the year. And I said, really? And I said, why? Oh, I don't know, just do it. I'm like, no, I really want to know. And she said, I don't know, I don't know. So, yeah. I've lost track, but let me go from this side. We'll go here and then go across. Yes?
I got a quick question and a follow-up. Are you going to be renaming your blog?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep the name of the blog and just do something else called Life After God, which is less of a blog and more of that space I was describing where people can process. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.
I have read your blog here and there, not everything, but I did notice there was a period a few months ago where you did mention that loneliness and depression and stuff, and I was wondering if you've sorted some of that out. Yeah. I mean, I think anytime there's a major shift in your life, you can experience loneliness and depression. Whether you lose a family member, or you have a breakup, or you lose your job, or, any of those things can cause an immense sense of loss in your life, and there's an emotional price that we pay for those losses. And to the degree that my faith was really important to me, losing it was an emotional loss as well as an intellectual loss, and an intellectual gain as well. So it's not sort of just black and white. So yeah, I did have a period of real confusion and I also just wanted to give up the quest. I was like, I'd rather just enjoy my life, which I think a lot of atheists very quickly go to that, and they don't come to gatherings like this because they're just happy to not be here right now, just to be home doing whatever they do. So there was a part of me that was just like, this is too much work, this is too emotional. There's definitely practical concerns in my life about my career and where I'm headed next and what I should do with my time, how I should steward the responsibility that I have for a year without God. People are like, what are you going to do next? And I'm like, I don't know. Stay tuned, so there's just that pressure of trying to figure this all out. But I'm happy, and I would not consider myself depressed. Though I tend to be a melancholy person in general. I was saying to the other group yesterday that a lot of times Christians want to accuse atheists of being nihilists. And to counter that, atheists very quickly like to say, oh no, there's great meaning and purpose in life. And I'm sort of one that's I don't know. I think life is as meaningful as you make it. I kind of think that nihilism, there's enough nihilism to go around, first of all. I wrote an article for the CNN blog the other day where I said basically Christians are fostering nihilism because if police Christians who are putting off all the really meaningful, important stuff to a future afterlife, really, by de facto, create a nihilistic void in this life. And so for me, that's one of the biggest problems with Christian apocalypticism and eschatology, is that it creates a sense of meaninglessness about this life. What I've gained by shedding all of that is actually a fresh new sense of meaning about my life now. But Christians always want to go to absolute meaning, platonic meaning, up here kind of meaning. And I'm like, no, I didn't ever believe in that kind of meaning. I think we get what we make of it. That's it. And then it's over. And one day it'll be over for everyone. Long time from now, hopefully, but, so I don't think my point to Christians now is I don't need some big abstract platonic meaning in the sky to give meaning to my life right now. Anybody that's ever smiled because someone smiled at them knows what it means to just create meaning out of the stuff of everyday life. Or eating a good meal and thought, damn, that was good. That's it. That's what life's made of, is those moments. And if we don't pay attention to those, I don't see that there's any great cosmic meaning other than what evolution gives us to drive towards reproduction and making more of this stuff. Yeah. Yes?
Do you find yourself dealing with and approaching the idea of grief in a far different way now that you've sort of gone through this journey?
Just like grief in my life, just in general?
Yeah, sort of in general, not necessarily dealing with one specific thing, sort of in general, grieving and sort of loss or anything.
Yeah, thankfully I haven't had a major loss since then, although my grandmother had a health scare, and she's 90, so I'm sort of realizing that, in the next decade or so, we're going to lose her, and that means something different to me now. I think, it's a big adjustment to think about death being the final thing. Like the interview I did for the Humanist magazine, they asked me if I was afraid of dying or if I thought about death differently, and I said, I'm not really afraid of being gone. Like a lot of people say, there were like 14 billion years when I wasn't here, so a few billion after that, I probably won't feel any differently about it. The big loss is actually the promise of seeing your loved ones someday, that kind of feeling like, when I said goodbye to my grandfather, I had this feeling like I was going to see him again. And so it's kind of like grieving it again, like, okay, I'm not going to see him again. So it's a way of avoiding grieving, I think. So I think when you grieve without the promise of an afterlife, you have to actually grieve. Like, you have to really let go. Whereas Christianity allows you to not fully let go all the way. Which could be comforting, to some people. I understand how that is. We cope. I think the pernicious nature of religion is due largely to our fear of dying. I think we continue to tell ourselves that we're not really going to die. Like in Genesis chapter 1, the snake said to Eve, you won't really die. Right? That was the big fear. And luckily I haven't had a big loss since then, but I'll let you know. I think loss is just hard. And we shouldn't be afraid to admit it. We don't have to be like superhumans to defend ourselves against people who want to attack us for our atheism. I think we just need to just be honest. I'm moving across this way here.
A common experience that many of us that have left a faith have is when we run into someone from that faith that's still in it, you either get a question or an accusation that's, did you ever really believe?
Oh, yeah.
So what's your experience been with that, and how do you respond to it?
Yeah, I get that all the time. Like that series of comments that I referred to a minute ago, it's loaded with that. It's the easiest way for a Christian to explain what's happened. In my case, I was a pastor. I led people to faith. I baptized them. I led churches. I gave sermons. Like, if you really want to believe that I wasn't a true Christian, that's up to you, I guess. Like, I can't make you believe differently, but it's a pretty big leap in my case. I told a story somewhere when I was in college. I used to go for a morning walk, which is a nice thing to do. But on my morning walks, Jesus went with me. Very literally, like I would walk and talk out loud in prayer to God. And it was a very beautiful time for me. Every time I saw something beautiful in nature, I would ascribe that to the gift that God gave me that morning to reassure me of His love. And there's something profoundly beautiful about feeling like the universe loves you. That you are loved, especially if you haven't experienced a lot of love in your life. So I totally get why that's powerful, and I experienced all of that. People say, did you ever feel like God answered your prayers? Of course. Did you ever feel like God was speaking to you and communicating with you? Absolutely. Yes. That's what it means to be a Christian. Like, I don't know. Yes, I experienced all of those things, and so it's a cop-out, I think, for Christians who don't want to think about the issues. So I try not to respond to it very much. Yeah. I really try in general not to allow other people to put me in a defensive posture. Because I feel like it's just losing, unless it's a proper debate. Like, unless it's agreed upon, we're going to discuss this together. This is what, for example, William Lane Craig likes to do. To me, as well as everybody else. You'll say something, and he'll say, "Oh, so what you're saying is," and he'll completely misstate what you said, and then you're immediately in the position of going, "No, that's not what I said," and right there you've lost. like it's over almost at that point. So I just screw it. Like I'm not going to get involved in that. If they don't want to meet me at a level that's like intellectually honest, then
Well, you can tell by the question if they're wanting to meet you or they're not. So.
yeah. And the name of the game for me is authenticity. Like if you're authentically communicating with me how you feel, I'm less concerned about what you believe than that you're being honest. I know plenty of people that are honest believers, and they honestly acknowledge the problems with Christianity and religion. They honestly acknowledge the mystery, the problem with evolution in the Bible. They honestly acknowledge all those things and find a way to believe. I was that guy. So I thought, okay, I understand that, but we can have a conversation now based on that. But if you start the conversation by accusing me of something that you know isn't true, or even if you think it is true and it's an accusation, you're already putting me in a defensive posture. I'm just not going to go there. I don't want to go there. Yeah.
I first was going to ask you a question. But now, I want to advocate for you to become a kind of atheist that, for all practical reasons, I'm the only person to know that I'm this kind of atheist. And I'll tell you what the point is. When you were talking about Christ, you were right. Christ has a good feel to it, not because it's Christ, not because it's in the Bible. It's because what you learn from reading Joseph Campbell. The Christ myth pops up 8, 9, 10, 15, 16 different times throughout humanity. Christ has more to do with our experience as a male, going from childhood into adulthood. Our understanding will never bring life physically into this world. But yet, if we follow that hero's journey, we can create environments, cultures, communities, as you did as a pastor, so that's our feminine reality. Our feminine reality is we can build massive communities, beautiful structures, so that life can take place.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I emphasize a lot when I'm talking to people is that we're narratively constructed. I like to say that we're made of stories as well as stars. And I think that it's just part of the human experience is that we're narratively constructed.
The other part of there's two other things you got right. One, you got the Plato thing right, but here's the but. I don't know if you're aware of this. Post 1940, if you do not know or aware and you read the wrong translation of Plato's work, you will get something that started during the ancient Greeks and still bothers people today and bothers atheists specifically, and that is people who are religious know that they're lying. They know flat out all that stuff is made up. But they will change reality. They will create stories to create false evidence. Plato originally wasn't translated the way Plato is now. Plato originally was translated in a different way. Post 1940, it's been retranslated into the Plato that you're objecting to. On Facebook, I named myself a free-thinking Platonic Taoist because my atheistness has been since I've been a child. When atheists that I know argue against Christians, it's like you're arguing against something that doesn't exist. Why are you wasting your energy arguing? In other words, the only other way I know to give you the insight that I have is if I could dip you in chocolate and turn you into a black man for 24 hours. Or if I could change your gender.
I would go for that, by the way.
Or if I could change your gender and turn you into
I would go for that too.
and turn you into a woman for 24 hours. You would experience a kind of existence in the world that has nothing to do with you. Has everything to do with people. So my last point is the nihilism part. Cornel West has a definition.
Let me. Time is precious. Can we meet up after? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
One point I want everybody to hear this is that be careful of the reality other people create for you, the lie. In other words, the only person I object to in this world is a person who is not moral. I can get along with anybody, regardless of faith, race, creed, color, national origin, but if they're an immoral person, I cannot get along with them. And guess what? They don't like me. And I don't have to say anything. So you are headed down the road. Do not become the atheist that the pre-Socratics created in order to scare people into being religious. Be a true atheist. And that is a person who is searching for the truth and willing to accept it any place they find it, even if it means going back to being religious.
Brian, I was interested to know why you didn't stop on your journey and be spiritual but not religious after being, a pastor for a couple of decades, living in California.
Right? Lots of granola there.
So, and the feelings that you had, what Chris just called the feeling of the numinous, how do you reframe that differently, that it wasn't a spiritual experience and just didn't stick there?
Yeah, it's a great question. That experience of the numinous had faded for me over the years. I think I had relocated my spirituality from a kind of pietistic spirituality to sort of a social justice framing of spirituality. I guess from a kind of Methodist, puritanical kind of approach, which is big influence in the Adventist Church, to honestly more of a kind of a Jesuit approach to spirituality. So part of the challenge for me was that I wasn't experiencing that numinous thing. In fact, I was always frustrated by the spiritual but not religious, and I always liked to sort of play with people and tell them that I was religious but not spiritual. And I still sort of feel that way. Like I'm very fond of this idea that people, because we are meaning-making creatures, create meaning through rituals and through shared practices. And even if it's, getting coffee with a friend or a history parade, like a 4th of July parade is a liturgy. So we do this. We commemorate things. We put flags in the ground to commemorate a moment that we want to remember. A lot about remembrance and memory. All of these things for me are kind of religious-ish things. And that I totally understand, because I guess another way to say it is I felt like I became more Jewish and less Christian, more like an earthy type of spirituality rather than a metaphysical kind of thing. And so when I lost my faith in sort of the Bible and God being a being, there wasn't that spirituality there in that way to sort of catch me. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Did you get into apologetics much?
As a Christian, or
either?
No. In fact, when I was a Christian, I despised apologetics. I couldn't stand it because I felt like we were never going to convince anybody to be a Christian by arguments. Right. We're just not. There's just not a way to do that, I don't think.
And the reason I asked is you're discussing evolution, and I didn't know if a lot of, and if you looked at both sides of the argument scientifically.
Yeah, I didn't get into the evolution debate too much as a Christian either.
Yeah.
Just because I knew that it was a lost cause. I thought my denomination is very 6-day literal creation, and it was like the third rail. Like if I touched that, it would be over. There were already some biology professors that were fired at La Sierra University in Southern California for supposedly teaching evolution. They insisted that they were teaching biology. So they said, you ethicists and theologians will have to figure out what it all means. We're just telling you that this is what the biology is. So I had read some books about Christians who tried to reconcile evolution and creation, and I didn't really get into that. But as far as I went with it as a pastor was to sort of teach Genesis 1 and 2 and say to people, Genesis 1 and 2 is not about the origins of the earth. For the simple reason that the authors, whoever they were, of Genesis, didn't have modern scientific questions, let alone answers. Like they weren't asking scientific questions about origins. They were asking polemical questions about ideological battle with the nations around them and their creation myths. And they were saying, no, your creation myth, our God is better than your God because our God created out of love, your God created out of violence. And there was this kind of back and forth between creation myths. They were not asking, like, where did the human species originate? It just wasn't